Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So there are two main things that need to be addressed about these new MacBook Pros. One is going to be the battery life, and two is going to be the fan noise. Now, specifically, I have the 14-inch model that is the M1 Max. It's fully spec'd out, other than the 8 terabytes of storage. That wasn't necessary for me. But this machine has been a game changer for me, being a professional creative, doing video editing and photo editing. So naturally, over the last couple weeks, I've made quite a bit of content on this new M1 Max MacBook Pro because I'm so stoked about it. And I can't even begin to tell you how many comments or questions I've gotten about those two things. What's the battery life like, and then the fan noise. And I probably sound a little passionate about this topic because I hate when there's wrong information being spread around things. I see a lot of people telling people to stay away from certain specs or certain versions of this computer, and there's really not a whole lot of data or examples to back that stuff up. So I'm gonna talk to you guys about these things with my actual personal experience using this machine as a professional creative, doing 4K video editing, high megapixel photo editing, a little bit of design work, and then your everyday use of a normal computer. So I think you guys might be actually shocked by what I'm going to tell you, and I do hope you find this video helpful, at least if maybe you're deciding between what computer to get. If you guys do find it helpful, be sure to drop this video a thumbs up, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Without any further ado, let's hop right into this. So let's start out by talking about the fan noise. And I mean, I've seen people seriously been freaking out about the fans on the 14-inch MacBook, and I just don't really understand that. I literally saw it on a friend's video today. Someone commented saying, don't buy the 14-inch MacBook Pro because the fans are so extremely loud. And I just don't know where people are getting this from. So here's what I'll say. In the last 2 weeks I've been using this MacBook Pro, I've used it for a ton of things. I have edited hundreds of high megapixel photos at a time. I've done some serious 4K video editing with multiple cameras, multiple angles, motion graphics, different effects, and all editing footage from a camera that is in a very difficult codec for a computer to handle. And I'm talking Premiere Pro, not Final Cut, which is crazy optimized for the computer. So that's another thing working against me, is that I'm editing in Premiere Pro. So editing in Premiere Pro, Lightroom open, Photoshop open, Chrome with, whatever, 10 to 20 tabs. I've used this computer out on its own on battery. I've used it plugged into my ultra wide, and the only time I have ever heard the fans turn on this computer is when I'm exporting a video in Premiere Pro, which, mind you, the export times are ridiculously fast. The fan will turn on during that export for not even the entire duration. So usually a couple minutes into the export, the fans will kick on, and then once the export's done, the fans will turn off. And that is it. So there seems to be a lot of misconception out there about people talking about the fans are on all the time or they're crazy loud. Even when they were on for just a brief few minutes of when I was exporting videos, it was super minimal. I honestly didn't even notice. And actually a couple videos back, I actually was filming a clip for a different video and I was exporting a video in Premiere Pro. I'll play the video right here, but you guys can hear the fans in the background and they're really not loud. All right, good morning. And that's exporting a 12-minute video, and the export time took under 6 minutes. So the fans are on for maybe 4 minutes of that. And again, that is literally the only time I've ever heard the fans turn on. And even going back a couple generation in MacBooks, everyone knows how loud those fans were. Basically, if you opened up your computer or even opened up Chrome, your fans would just be on loud. A lot of people would say it sounds like a rocket ship taking off, or a plane taking off, something like that. And that's just how it was. MacBooks were pretty powerful, but the fans were just super loud. Now, when the 13-inch M1 MacBook Pro came out along with the M1 MacBook Air, that's where the whole game changed for fan noise and computers as a whole. Obviously, the MacBook Air didn't have fans, so that was a big thing. But even on the 13-inch M1 MacBook Pro, the fan noise wasn't really an issue. Now, I think it should be clear that just because the fans kick on your computer, that doesn't mean your computer is throttling. It's basically trying to prevent your computer from eventually throttling. Just because they kick on for a few minutes, it's just trying to keep the temperature down of the entire thing. I don't think this would even actually be a discussion if the 16-inch MacBook Pro was so silent and literally never had its fans turn on. Now, I actually haven't gotten my hands on a 16-inch model yet to try out. That might be changing soon, so definitely stay tuned to the channel. But because the 14-inch model, the fans kick on sometimes, and the 16-inch model, they really never kick on, I think people are just super scared about the fan noise on the 14-inch. But to me, it's really not a big deal. It's a crazy powerful laptop. This thing's going to have to be able to keep its temperature down. And obviously a smaller machine, it's going to be a little bit harder to do that. But I want to very much debunk that the fan noise on this computer is crazy loud or that you hear it all the time. For anything that I've done, and I definitely think I'm pretty damn intense on this computer, at least being a creative. It's an absolute non-issue to me. Like I said, if I'm using this all day long, no matter what I'm doing, I only hear the fans kick on during an actual export from Premiere Pro. All right, let's talk about the battery life on this 14-inch M1 Max MacBook Pro. Now, I've heard a lot of different things about the battery life, people being afraid of it, people wanting exact numbers. Obviously, I'm gonna put a little forewarning here. Everybody uses their computer very differently. They use different programs, they have a different amount of tabs open, they use a different web browser, or they even have different screen brightnesses going on. So there's always going to be a million different variables about battery life, but I'm gonna talk about my actual experience and what I've noticed about it. Now again, I want to mention those previous versions of MacBook Pros, like the 2018 or previous, the battery life on those were absolutely atrocious. On my 15-inch 2018 fully spec'd out MacBook Pro, I remember if I was doing any sort of creative work, that thing would last me like maybe an hour if it wasn't plugged in. Now again, when those first M1 chips came out for the 13-inch MacBook Pro along with the MacBook Air, everyone kind of got spoiled with battery life. It was like this whole new world. And the battery life on those 13-inch M1 MacBook Pros were insane. I remember I was flying, I edited a video for like a whole hour, and I think the battery went from like 100% to like 92. So that M1 chip was crazy efficient, but it's nowhere near the power of what these computers have. Now, personally, the way I use my MacBook Pro, whenever I do have it on the go, it's usually for a short amount of time. Whenever I'm here in my home office, most of the time, if I'm editing or doing, a lot of work, I'm usually hooked up to my ultra-wide monitor over there, which also just happens to charge this computer at the same time. So with this video in mind, as well as just my own mental health, knowing I made the right decision here, I decided to do some actual tests of me using this computer as a normal creative, doing high professional level work would do. So for the somewhat as realistic of a test that I could think of is I basically gave myself an hour to edit a YouTube video, and I made sure to know what the battery life was when I started and then what it was when I ended. So again, I'm editing in Premiere Pro, which isn't optimized as much as Final Cut. Also, I had Lightroom open and I had a bunch of different Chrome tabs open as well, Spotify, things like that. Just how I normally would be editing video. So at the start of the hour, the battery life was at 53%, and then at the end of the hour, it was down all the way at 14%. So I'm not gonna lie, that's worse than I thought it would be. At that point, you're talking like 2 hours of intense video work you could probably get out of this computer. Maybe 2.5 if you go all the way down to 0, starting at 100%. And that actually took me by surprise for a bit. Now there's something though that I kind of thought of to try, and I'm happy I did. I recently watched MKBHD's review of the 16-inch M1 Max MacBook Pro, and I noticed in his video, in the system preferences and the battery tab, there's actually different modes that you can put the 16-inch version in. I believe it's a low power mode, an automatic mode, and then I think a high performance mode. Now you don't get those options on the 14-inch model for whatever reason. You only have one option, which is the low power mode. So basically on the 16-inch, you get the 3 options, and then on the 14-inch, it seems like you get just that low power mode checked, which gives you 1 option, or unchecked, which I would assume is just automatic. So you kind of get 2 in my opinion. So I decided to redo that test. So I did another exact hour of video editing. I recharged my computer back up. I got it to 52% at the start. So at the start of the hour, I was at 52% battery. I was in the low power mode. And then at the end of that hour, it only got down to 27% battery. And I honestly didn't notice a single difference in performance. There was no lag. I was running everything back in full resolution. I again had motion effects and different graphics, things like that. So I saw absolutely 0 difference between that low power mode turned on and off as far as performance goes. So based off that test in the low power mode, doing intense video editing or creative work, whatever it is, that seems like it would last you closer to about 4-ish hours, which I think 4 hours doing like intense stuff is honestly pretty good for a laptop in my opinion. So that's kind of what I would say like the hardcore using of it is. And then actually the other night I decided to test me just kind of casually using it. So this was me just kind of watching TV, editing a bunch of photos in Lightroom. I was working on a thumbnail, just kind of on and off for about 4 hours. And I don't think anything honestly was that intense going on my computer. And in about 4 hours of doing that kind of casually, my battery was still at about 60%. So I think if you're doing non-intensive stuff, your battery is going to last way, way longer. So that's kind of my summary of my non-scientific tests of using this as how an actual creative would. Obviously, again, it's going to be a little bit dependent on everybody and their own personal use and how they use it. But I think for the people out there that are so afraid of the battery dying on this thing so quick, I don't really think it's that much to worry about. If you're able to get, between 2 to 4 hours of very intense work done on a computer that is this powerful and this mobile, to me, that's just a huge win. Now, if you're still that concerned about the battery life of this, I think you have a few options of what you can do. Either just get the 16-inch M1 Max MacBook Pro, which the battery life is going to be a lot better on that thing just because the battery is huge on that. Or you get the M1 Pro chip, which doesn't have as many cores of GPU that it has to power all the time, so you're going to get better battery life out of that. Or you can just go with the 13-inch M1 MacBook Pro that's cheaper, and that thing, the battery life is absolutely killer. You're just obviously not going to get the same level of performance out of that. So I think this 14-inch M1 Max MacBook Pro is maybe for a very specific user. They're someone that needs a very high ceiling in performance, but also they want a machine that is small enough that it's super portable. I'm personally really excited that they put the same level of performance in the 14-inch model as the 16-inch model. And if the biggest hit you're going to take from that is the battery life, that's just totally fine with me. And I gotta say this, if you're that concerned about the battery life of your computer and that's like your top priority, you're probably not doing heavy enough work that you need this level of performance out of your computer. This M1 Max chip is exactly what certain creators have been wanting for a very long time. Apple gave us that level of performance that some of us really needed or wanted, and there's just going to be a few drawbacks from that. One is going to be the battery life, and the other is going to be sometimes you're gonna hear a little fan noise. So guys, that's really my thoughts on the battery life and the fan noise for the 14-inch M1 Max MacBook Pro. Let me know down in the comments below if you guys have any other questions about this computer or just these new MacBooks in general. I definitely am going to be doing a full in-depth review of this computer once I spend a little bit more time with it. So any comments, questions, things like that you guys wanna see would be super helpful. But guys, that's gonna be it for me in today's video. I hope you enjoyed watching, or maybe at least you found it helpful. If you did, will you please drop this video a thumbs up? If you're new around here, consider subscribing. It helps out me and the channel more than you can even imagine, and you don't want to miss any future uploads. But that's it for me. I'll catch you guys in the next video very, very soon. Peace, guys.